now. These are articles from NPR, Reuters, and the Supreme Court of the United States blog. Justices allow Arizona to enforce documentation. We'll just leave it at documentation. Supreme Court allows Arizona to require documentation. Reuters, U.S. Supreme Court revives Arizona's existing laws pertaining to documentation. This is a huge victory for Trump in a very important state, a traditionally red state. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. I'll be doing numerous segments on this every single day. The Supreme Court and the stock market and the unfortunate financial collapse that we're about to experience. Unfortunately, the stock market crash and collapse and the Supreme Court rulings are the two things you need to worry about or concern yourself with. The Supreme Court has consistently, and you will hear analysis on one of the top decisions, the most important decisions, the immunity victory in a second, but we've had about six or seven decisions, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Paul, thank you so very much. We've had about 6 or 7 decisions, in addition to this one, that have bolstered President Trump and defeated Democrats politically. The first one, the Colorado ban being overturned, an unconstitutional Colorado ban being overturned, the amazing and historic immunity victory for Trump over the special counsel, the constitutional presidential immunity. Then you have Justice Jackson siding with conservatives on limiting the sentences of January defendants. Then you have this one. So really, it's like 3 or 4 major victories. This one in Arizona, but then you're going to have a 5th victory overturning the unconstitutional conviction. A state cannot decide a federal crime. A state cannot convict a person on a federal crime without the federal government involved. We'll get to these Supreme Court decisions in a second. Let's focus on the economy right now. Price controls and a whole bunch of other things Democrats want to do or Harris wants to do would absolutely tank the economy even further. We're on the brink of a market collapse, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just continue. And I want to talk a little bit more about the economy right now, and then we'll get back to the Supreme Court.
Let's bring in Steve Moore, co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Steve, great to see you. Okay, so Jay Powell says the time has come for Fed policy to adjust. That's strongly implying a rate cut at the next meeting. Mm-hmm. Looks like 25 basis points. Do you think it could be bigger than that?
I think it probably will be 25 basis points. And I think that this is a mistake, Brian. And the reason I think it's a mistake is that it looks, I mean, you could make an argument for starting to reduce rates because inflation has come down, but we're still well above the 2% target. We're at about 3% right now. But here's the thing that I think bothers me about this. This looks blatantly political to me. It really does. I mean, we're 2 months to an election. The Fed has been talking about lowering rates for the last year to year and a half. Now they're going to do it right before an election. You know, Jerome Powell keeps talking about how he wants to keep divorce politics from their decisions. But when you look at this, I don't know. It's hard to say that this isn't a political maneuver. It really is.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve, because I was wondering the same thing myself and asking, what is Jerome Powell really risking if he's letting...
So it's obviously political. They want the market, they don't want the market to collapse. The problem is that when they lower interest rates, more money, billions will flood into the stock market that's already overvalued. So what do you think is going to take place? The stock market collapse and the Supreme Court decisions are the two, I should say the stock market and the Supreme Court are the two things you need to, two things you need to concern yourself with every single day. I'll have a live stream at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight. So you had that huge Arizona victory just the other day, and then you have a stock market we're on the brink of a stock market collapse, a market crash. That will cement Trump's victory. There's no way Democrats can win if that happens or when that happens. Unfortunately, nobody wants that to happen. I don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. I just think 4 years of mismanagement has unfortunately led to, virtual certainty that we're going to have this collapse. But let's continue.
Letting politics lead a decision here, because you're right, we're not really back at that 2% yet. There are some that are concerned that we could risk the reigniting inflation here, especially with housing where it is. What are you worried about happening?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think you're spot on. And what would be the problem with waiting till after the election to make this decision? I think people would be much more comfortable with that. And I think Trump is going to attack this. I mean, back, by the way, when he was president, I remember they held rates way too high for too long in 2017 and almost, submerged the economy into a recession. So, now, should they be cutting rates? I think we're getting close to that point, but I still think, I still have that lingering worry about inflation, having gone to the grocery store and the gas pump and still seeing these high prices.
Then they cut interest rates, inflation goes up also, in addition to expediting a market crash. But they're just worrying about the next 2 months. I think that they cut rates. It's probably one of the worst things they can do in terms of preventing a market crash. It actually could expedite one. That's one of the huge pitfalls of what they're about to do, which would, like I said, cement Trump's victory.
Smells a little fishy to me, Steve. That's all I'm going to say on that. But there's something else that smells fishy, too. Yeah. And it was all what Kamala Harris was talking about last night. So if you watched her remarks, you saw a lot of the claims that she was making seemed to me like they were literally in desperate need of a fact check. Let's listen.
We are not going back to when Donald Trump tried to cut Social Security and Medicare. He and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with or without Congress. He intends to enact what in effect...
Yeah, that's not possible. Also, we had record low poverty with Trump, record highs in household median income. Mortgage rates were less than half of what they are now. When people say it's so difficult to buy a home, yeah, you vote Democrat. Why do you think it's difficult? Because you're voting Democrat. Mortgage rates have doubled because the Fed funds rate has gone exponentially higher, 5 to 6%, and about 5.5%, and or 5.25 to 5.5%. And what happens? The mortgage rates go up. Mortgage rates were 3% under Trump. They're now closer to 7%. You've literally doubled your mortgage payment just because Trump wrote mean tweets.
In fact, is a national sales tax. Call it a Trump tax.
Okay, so I've never heard him say that he's going to cut Medicare and Social Security. I've never heard him say that there will be a nationwide abortion ban. I have never heard him say that there will be some Trump tax. Steve, he has been begging them to keep the old tax cuts in place. They're the ones that want to let them expire. You watch this and just don't even know what to think. She's lying.
You know why you haven't heard him say that? Because he never has said that. I've been in many meetings with him. And by the way, I would like to see some reductions in some of these entitlement programs. But Trump has basically said, I'm not cutting benefits. And look, I don't think we should be cutting Social Security benefits. And I don't think we should be cutting Medicare benefits. Although I do think, by the way, there's a lot of ways you could go after the fraud and abuse and double charging by the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies without hurting people's benefits. On the abortion, look, Democrats want this election to be about abortion. Let's face it. They want it to be about abortion. We want it. I'm a Trump advisor, as you know. We want it to be about the economy, we want it to be about the kitchen table issues. And I found it so fascinating that, that Biden and Harris have been in office now for almost 4 years. And it's been 12 of the last 16 years. It's been the Democrats running Washington, and they're blaming all the problems with our economy on Trump.
Right.
I mean, go figure.
Meanwhile, as we search for what Harris is promising to do, trying to figure out what her policy is, what we can tell so far is that it includes a lot more spending, the child tax credit, the help for first-time home buyers. But Steve, what concerns me is how she's going to pay for this continued spending. What are you seeing as you analyze the details that we do have, some of them on your screen right now? Take us through what this will cost the American person.
So this is as serious as a heart attack for investors, and this is an investment show. You call it big money.
So you raise corporate taxes to 28%, and then you have more layoffs, especially we're heading towards a recession. We might already be in a recession, but we're heading towards a recession. We actually had a recession technically in 2022, two quarters of negative growth. We had that in 2022. But Democrats, of course, changed the definition like they always do of words. You're going to raise taxes at a moment when inflation is already a tax and interest rates are very high. So you're paying more for your credit card bill. You're paying more for your auto loan. You're paying more for your mortgage. And they're going to want you to pay more for your grocery bill because of inflation. And they want you to pay more in taxes. And if you have a business, they also want you to pay more. So they completely mismanaged the economy, and how to get things back on track is they want to just tax you into oblivion.
How you can make money. I tell you, I read through the synopsis of Kamala Harris's new tax plan, and this is one of the most anti-business, anti-investment tax proposals that I've seen in 40 years.
Yeah.
This would double the capital gains tax. It would tax unrealized capital gains for the first time. It would increase the corporate tax. It would.
Everyone, Democrat, Republican, everyone should be concerned or frightened about unrealized capital gains tax, unrealized gains. So your house goes up, or an investment property goes up in value. Your house goes up in value. I'm not 100% sure if they mean one's house as well. But let's say you have an investment property. Let's say you have stocks that you own. Let's say are they referring to Bitcoin also? That'll be interesting to try to get them to collect on that. But your investment goes up. You have not sold your stock, you have not sold your property, and you paid 25% of a hypothetical sale or theoretical sale. What is that? What is that even about? What? It's almost as if you want to destroy the U.S. economy, like you actually want to, and they're like, how do we do it? How do we find ways to destroy the economy?
Would increase.
And by the way, what if you don't have that money for the theoretical tax on something you didn't sell, right? If you sell a property, if you sell a stock, yeah, you pay capital gains. Well, what if you don't have the money? Then what happens for a theoretical sale?
Increase tax on stock transactions. This is an assault on the investor and the business owners in America. It would have, in my opinion, an extremely negative effect on stocks. And now the market isn't down today because I think people are kind of shrugging off and saying, well, she's either not going to win or she's not going to get this through. But she's making Michael Dukakis and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton look like moderate conservatives compared to something like this that would, by the way, if you under that plan, if you were to invest, say, $1 million in a new investment and you take into account all of these tiers of higher taxes, you're only going to keep 20 cents on the dollar.
Exactly.
80 cents of that dollar will go to government. Come on.
It is called.
And the job market is not doing well. Let's listen to this.
Card debt has exploded, and it's exploded to the highest it's ever been, and the cost of a typical monthly mortgage has tripled. Vote Trump and your incomes will soar, your savings will grow, young people will be able to afford a home, and we will bring back the American dream bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. When Kamala lays out her fake economic plan this week, probably will be a copy of my plan, because basically that's what she does.
Here with reaction, the host of Making Money on the Fox Business Network, Charles Payne, former White House Chief of Staff, Reince Priebus. It's kind of an unprecedented challenge, Charles, when you look at this, because we've never had a situation before where somebody gets into the game this late, gets a free pass from the media, gets to, through campaign ads, totally contradict every position she's on tape taking, and we're supposed to believe that crap?
You know, though, here's the thing. I saw an interview on another network, but we showed it a lot today, where this middle-aged woman who had a pretty good job talked about how much the price of a bell pepper had gone up. And then she blamed the government. And then she said they don't know what they're doing. She didn't say the Biden-Harris administration, and she didn't acknowledge that they do know what they're doing, because their plan has nothing to do with the economy and everything to do with creating gargantuan government that controls every facet of our lives. And the transformation of that is going to be so extraordinarily expensive, not just to create, but to maintain. Over the last 12 months, we have paid $1.1 trillion on the debt that we have. It's absolutely mind-boggling. By the way, Inflation Reduction Act, that money's still cascading into the economy, still keeping inflation afloat. And it's mind-boggling to me that people, when they get in that voting booth, are going to have two choices. Do I vote for the vibe and accept the empty wallet? I mean, that's your choice. Do I want a better life, the life I know I had, or do I want the vibe, the feel-good thing? And I would think maybe by November, this whole honeymoon phase will be over. By the way, we got some job numbers coming out real soon. The last jobs report was pretty bad. Watch for the jobs numbers to get worse. And you mentioned Jerome Powell cutting rates. He's going to cut rates based on the fact that our employment picture is imploding. Keep that in mind. These rate cuts aren't going to save the economy nearly in time to help in November, but they will acknowledge that the labor. Well, but the labor, but Sean, don't miss out. Don't miss this out. Don't miss out. The rationale for him to do it, though, will be an acknowledgement that our jobs market is imploding, and that's the headline. That's the headline. Yeah, that our jobs market is imploding. That's the headline.
Reince, let me ask you this. You know, you got all.
So corporations have negative outlooks for the future. Job market is imploding. Credit card debt is at record high. Inflation is still soaring, or at least going up. And then you have interest rates still very high. And then they want to cut interest rates to pump more money into an overvalued stock market with talk of a recession on the horizon. Okay. Does that point to good times ahead financially? These are the worst combinations. We are skating on thin ice. And I'm not even getting to the price of oil and global instability and diesel fuel. Okay, Democrats, the battle Democrats have against diesel fuel, which is what, industries use to ship produce, all of our goods across country. So just do the math. It's the Supreme Court and the economy and stock market. Unfortunately, when the economy tanks or the stock market tanks, that cements Trump's victory, thank God. But unfortunately, people lose money. So there's the Supreme Court victories and the economy are two things you need to concern yourself with every single day. We'll discuss and analyze and address those things. We're almost at 266,000 subscribers, people. You could be the 266,000th subscriber if you're new to this channel. I will have a live stream tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern. Also, hit subscribe.
All these contradictions, all the flip-flopping, flailing, and no interviews, and no gaggles, and no press conferences. You know, everything that she has said, I think these words need to be eaten by her campaign every day in every ad in every swing state. And I don't know that that's happening yet, is it? You're in Wisconsin. You're in a swing state.
Well, it's not happening at full rate yet. And, there's some strategy there as far as how much you want to keep money tight until you have to unload it after Labor Day. I don't think that's an issue yet. But you're bringing up a good point. Look, Kamala Harris is trying to do a couple things. Number one, she's got the do nothing campaign. And like you said, the media is helping her out. But the other thing she's doing is very slowly and slyly, as you also pointed out, she's separating herself from Joe Biden. She's trying to do it. She's sort of getting away with it a little bit, I guess. But the way that you win these things is to do what Donald Trump did today, is you go where the votes are. I mean, the big secret in politics is you win by getting more votes than your opponent. And where are the votes? They're in the economy. They're on the border. They're at crime issues. And what do you have to do? You have to, number one, attack your opponent on the issues that matter and move voters. Number one. Number two, you got to keep it simple. You have to do it early and often. And then you have to do what you laid out in your monologue, which is you have to tie your opponent to those very issues that matter that we've just been talking about, which is there's no better way to beat an opponent. And any political expert will tell you the same thing, is when you've got the words coming out of their mouth saying something that's completely opposite of what they're now trying to sell the American people over and over and over again. There is nothing more powerful than a split screen with their own words coming out of their mouth. And that's really what has to happen here. And it has to happen early and often.
So their economic plan is pretend that they didn't cause inflation, pretend that they didn't raise interest rates, ignore the fact that they flooded the country full of strategic petroleum reserves, while at the same time making it difficult for American oil and gas companies to operate. Why would they do that? If the Green New Deal is about limiting oil and gas exploration, then why flood the country full of strategic petroleum reserves? But here, none of their policies actually work. These are all like they're all designed to mask underlying problems they created. Let's continue.
That's the focus of tonight's angle.
We are not going back.
Going back to what? Record low poverty, record highs in household median income, first president to step foot in North Korea, a president that we had in Trump that brought home Americans with the Doha Agreement that Biden and Harris completely botched. Those 13 Americans should be alive today. And the other people who perished that day should be alive. Harris and Biden literally used our moral enemies, literally used them as part of security to leave that country. It was not part of the plan. Then left billions and billions in armament. That was not, or hundreds of, it was hundreds of millions. That was not part of the plan. It was a May 1st, 2021 withdrawal, not a haphazard summer withdrawal. So it was Trump that brought home, Americans from a never-ending conflict. We still have a presence there. Leaving was good. The way we left was terrible.
We are not going back.
She actually wants us to go back, well, to the 1970s. She's not content with just the inflationary misery of the Carter era. Kamala wants the crippling shortages that went along with it.
It will be my day one priority to fight to bring down prices, to take on the big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging.
So it's your day one objective. It hasn't been the past 4 years of price gouging that you... So Harris and Biden allowed price gouging for 4 years. When inflation was at 9%, corporations were gouging the most, correct? So when inflation was 9% in 2022, and Harris and Biden allowed that, and then raised interest rates through the roof, and then released strategic petroleum reserves. So what happened to price gouging? They weren't talking about price gouging then. In fact, they said that inflation was only temporary. Then it skyrocketed to 7%. Oh, so you have to be president to address all of the illegal activity from corporations that you allowed for 4 years. Okay, or they're completely making it up. They have no plan, actually, and they're just blaming corporations for their economic mismanagement.
Oh, she's tough. She's going to take on those companies. Well, what does that mean?
Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect, but it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger, dramatically more inflation.
He's 100% right, of course. Kamala will tomorrow propose the first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging in the food and grocery industries, and claiming that there's a big difference between fair pricing in competitive markets and excessive prices unrelated to the cost of doing business. Well, that's spoken like...
Is this why iPhones are so expensive? Does Apple price gouge? You should, well, don't ever engage in a debate with a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat. But all these wonderful Democrats voting for Harris, they have iPhones. Are they complaining about the price of the iPhones? Why isn't the Biden-Harris administration going after computers, iPhones, cell phones, TVs, social media companies? Why? I mean, who's to say what is a fair price and what is a type of collusion, which is price gouging, or a type of illegal activity?
Like a true Bernie Sanders socialist. Now, add free market economics to the list of topics that Harris apparently just cannot comprehend. Now, why are prices high as compared to, say, 2019? Was there no corporate greed 4 years ago? Well, prices are high because the cost of doing business is high, because trillions that Biden and Harris spent on climate and COVID boondoggles shot up inflation, and because of their Greeniac policies that drove up the cost of oil and gas. So responding with price controls is like dropping kerosene on an open flame. The woman's going to burn down the entire economy with this idea. Yet her advisors think that you're as dim-witted as she apparently is, because she believes that women are going to jump on board the argument that there are vulture capitalists in the grocery business that are just waiting to rob you blind, and that only she can stop them. But let's look at these supposedly obscene profit margins. Kroger's is 1.43% for...
Compare that to the profit margin of a Nike shoe or an Apple iPhone, or, a handbag from a top fashion company. What's the profit margin of, a major clothing company? Okay, a lot higher. These are low margin, high volume. A grocery store is about high volume. You vote for Democrats, you're going to pay more. You won't be able to afford a barbecue, which, by the way, apparently the far left has a problem with for some reason. But barbecues are fantastic. Well, if it costs you, let's say right now, for a major barbecue, like $300, okay, like 20 people. Okay, it will easily cost $600 to $700. You just double the price of everything, because that's what's going to happen. You won't be able to afford. Nobody will really be able to afford a Labor Day, Memorial Day barbecue. Let's continue.
For April, where was it in April 2020? 1.66%. That's the new profit margin. Yeah, and just for the sake of comparison, Apple's most recently reported profit margin is 26.61%. So, okay, is she going to set the price of iPhones and MacBooks next? I mean, how far can those prices rise? Government's going to step in? Well, maybe not because they're her friends, but I would not be surprised if they tried to slap controls on oil companies next and their pricing. Of course, that's exactly what Venezuela moved to. And after all, then the government there just took over the companies. And state control of everything is their ultimate goal.
The Biden administration has been putting pressure on some of the companies, which frankly is what we're going to hear some of from Vice President Harris, is my understanding, in her economic speech that she plans to give on Friday. Pressure has to be put on some of these corporate entities.
Now, by pressure, she means government intervention in private businesses. And all this will do is to force companies to innovate less, build less, and cut back on supply, which is exactly what we saw during the Carter era when price controls were in place for gasoline.
As has become common in many states in the East, cars have been lining up before dawn.
Your economic...
She's not going to.
Well, rent control isn't just a bad way to address the effects of inflation. It may be one of the worst, and it's been undeniable for decades. Now, this statement is from left-wing economist Paul Krugman. This is back in 2000. The analysis of rent control is among the best understood issues in all of economics, and among economists anyway, one of the least controversial. In a 1992 poll of the American Economic Association, it found that 93% of its members agreed that a ceiling on rents reduces quality and quantity of housing. There are your shortages. But I'll grant Kamala one thing. She's correct when she says Trump wants to take us back. Because it's taking us back, all right, but it's back to the economic boom of 2019. Now, like I said,
2019 was, I look at 2019 as the last, if you want to use quote unquote normal year in the American economy. Okay, or the global economy. There was something about life that changed from 2019 until the next year and beyond, okay? I never thought that the country would shut down economic activity. Something that nations go to war, to go to battle to prevent what we did, willingly, gleefully in many cases, okay? Because bureaucrats were saying, I can't believe the whole country's not shut down. They pumped trillions. When there's an economic catastrophe or financial stock market collapse, bubble bursting, it'll likely be before 2025. Likely, almost certainly before November, unfortunately, because the stock market is at all-time highs, yet every other indicator is terrible. So do the math on that. But 2019, we had record low poverty, record highs in household median income. The average family, the average household had more money to spend. We had less credit card debt. Did you have less credit? I know I did. Everyone had. People were putting money on credit cards the next year because things were shutting down and everyone's businesses were affected. And so they prevented people from working, flooded the country full of trillions and trillions of dollars. Inflation went up, and they said, 4 years later, it's the corporations. But anyway, yeah, we should go back to 2019, my God. But Trump is mean, so we can't have a good economy.
Earlier, we don't need to go back to the Carter era. And her socialist economic policies will make it harder for young people to grow a nest egg and grow a family.
Everything is so expensive.
So we haven't talked about price controls yet. This is fun.
businesses are not really happy with Kamala Harris's price-fixing plan. They say it'll just make problems worse. Bar rescue guy John Taffer joins me now. John, welcome back. We've heard from various industries, and they've all told us, look, price controls don't work. All right, what about the restaurant business? You're in it. What happens?
Oh, Stuart, it's a nightmare. Good to be back, by the way. Think of the hamburger, Stuart. First of all, there's thousands of different hamburgers a restaurant can buy. There's prime, there's choice, there's different shapes, different sizes, there's filet mignon, there's prime rib, every blend, every type you can think about. So she has to send an analyst in to price every type of hamburger. Then the rancher's costs can't go up, Stuart. His price for feed, electronics, must remain the same so he can sell it to the processing plant. Then the processing plant's costs can't go up. They have to stay exactly the same. Fuel, equipment, transportation, labor. Then when it goes to the distributor, his costs can't go up. Fuel, distribution, union, all the other costs associated with his business. Then the restaurant gets the hamburger in a price-controlled way. Now I have a question, Stuart. What about the bun? What about the tomato? What about the lettuce? What about the ketchup? What happens then? I mean, it becomes absurd. You cannot accomplish this. And when we look at past countries that have done it, Stuart, shortages happen. If the bun guy can't make money, he stops making buns. So the supply side impact is massive. It's an absurd premise. The fact that it's being presented as a policy is as absurd as the premise itself.
Okay, next case. Harris wants to raise the corporate tax rate from 21 to 28%. What?
This, in addition to the price controls, but you have Wall Street, and I don't think this is a very good thing, but Wall Street and the stock market will, the closer it gets, and let's say Harris is up 3% in the polls, and everyone is saying Trump is going to lose, that alone could create the environment for a stock market collapse, which would then ensure Trump wins. But corporations are petrified of Democrats. Why? Because they want to tax, they want to cut 7% into their profit, which means that they're going to lay off workers. Democrats or far left socialists or communists, they care so much about the working class. In fact, there's a magazine dedicated to the far left. You could find it at like Barnes & Noble. It's a political magazine. I'm not going to tell you the name. It sells for over $14. Who's buying a magazine for $14? The same people who want to tax you into oblivion and who care about the working class and want to espouse left-leaning socialist ideology are selling a magazine for almost over $14 for a magazine at a bookstore. Okay, I'm not going to tell you the magazine, but you could go to Barnes & Noble and see if you could find it. But this alone could start a market crash.
What would that do to your business?
Well, Stuart, that's taking 7% of the profits that we make out of our pockets. Those dollars are used for upgrades, for remodeling, for employee raises, for systems, for marketing, research and development, all of these things. A communist country, China, is 3% lower than us. So two things, Stuart. From the business standpoint, of course, it's a disaster. We're going to see reductions in payroll, reductions in other ways, price increases, things to offset that impact. From an American standpoint, how do we compete in a global marketplace when our companies are paying a higher tax rate than our largest competitor that is a communist government, and they're 3 points lower? Stuart, it destroys the business on a local basis, and it weakens America's economy on a global basis. These are policies that make no sense. Stuart, when you start to put these things together, words like catastrophe appear. And that's the most horrifying of all. These decisions can't be made on an isolated basis. They have to be made on a collective basis that puts us on a plan to move forward.
So you can forget about getting a barbecue or even McDonald's. If McDonald's, I read McDonald's is about $50 for a family of four. You're looking at a family of 4 or 5 paying 60 to 70 bucks at McDonald's. And I'm not kidding on that.
Democrat Governor Andy Beshear had to say about Kamala Harris's price-fixing proposal.
This isn't about trying to price fix. It's just making sure that the economy is operating the way it should, that this is real.
How do you win Kentucky, a red state, pushing for price controls? I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Really supply and demand, which we all respect. It's just making.
We respect supply and demand. Of course we do. When the price is right. I would like to buy my iPhone for $20. I respect the supply and demand. I just think the iPhone should be $20. Respect and the price control. Two things can be fine together.
Making sure that coming out of the pandemic or in difficult times that people aren't increasing the price of food just to make a bigger profit. All it is making sure.
Democrats pushed to shut down economic activity, which affected shipping, trucking, supply chains, employment. There was scarcity of employment and also goods and services. So they artificially completely obliterated demand. Then demand skyrocketed through the roof immediately when they started opening up. They completely destroyed the normal supply and demand chart for the economy, and then they blame corporations.
Sure that capitalism stays within the guardrails, and it's not new. We've been doing this in the States for a long time.
Kevin O'Leary joins me now.
How do you become a Democratic governor of a red state? I mean, you read the memo, price control's good. Everyone says, but not one Democrat they've all taken, what, AOC is an econ major, apparently. So when have price controls worked? Give me a time and date and where price controls have worked in a country. It's never ever worked, and they don't work on a state level. What grocery chain operates in Kentucky with price controls? So, I mean, it's just unbelievable. They get the memo. Price control's good. Oh, but it's just we love supply and demand. But come on, it's just. They get the memo and that's it. It's just all logic goes out the window.
Now, I got a feeling, Kevin, that you really don't agree with that, do you?
No, I don't. And I have to look at it through the lens of an investor. I have to invest regardless of who's in the White House. So I really perk my ears up, Stuart, when I hear policy, as I did at a rally this weekend. I've spoken with dozens of investors, and we're quite shocked. Just from the 30,000 feet, we thought Harris was going to reboot her whole position to the middle. The idea was to get the swing voters on board with her with a middle strategy. Instead, we're getting Bidenomics 2.0, which is a shock. In addition to Bidenomics 2.0, if you look through the rally proposals, it's basically the same stuff they've been touting for the last 36 months. You've got this price control, price fixing patina on top of it, which we know doesn't work. You go back to the 70s when we tried this in the U.S., it was a disaster. Look at Venezuela today or North Korea or the old USSR tried this. It leads to black markets. It leads to a complete loss of freedom of goods and the breakdown of distribution. I mean, this is a really, really bad idea. And I'm so shocked that she's doing it. We're all shocked. We can't believe this is the platform. We're almost stunned because this leads to a position of just saying, well, you're getting the same thing you had. And Bidenomics as a brand is toxic waste to the swing voter. It's associated with inflation. All of these ideas are very inflationary.
If Harris wins, which I give like 5% chance, if Harris wins, and then Democrats or the people who vote Democrat, half the country, technically over half the country, complain about, oh my God, inflation. It's twice as expensive. You voted for price controls, genius, because you saw the Democratic governor of Kentucky say how wonderful it is. Okay? You voted for price controls. And everything's going to be expensive. They want to control the price, let's say, of gasoline and diesel fuel. Everything will be expensive. Rent will be far more expensive. Everything will be expensive. And nobody asks, well, why are things more expensive than they were in 2019? Because we've had 4 years of Biden-Harris, and because we shut down economic activity in Trump's last year in office, which was pushed gleefully by the Democratic Party and bureaucrats and media, citing a consensus of people who agreed with them. Not the experts who agreed with them. The experts who didn't agree were kicked off of Twitter.
Let's turn our attention to the Donald Trump side of the coin. One expert warns that Trump's tariffs could spark a trade war and an inflation shock.
We've still kept Trump's tariffs against China, and we've still kept them. They're meant to be a short-term tactic. In fact, when Trump says, well, you know what, we'll put 100% tariff, that's a short-term negotiating tactic. But Mr. Wonderful explained.
Within a year, what do you think to Trump's tariff proposals?
The tariffs have been on for years, Stuart. This is basically a fight with China to get to a level playing field in trade. Personally, I don't like tariffs long term, but I understand them as weaponry. What I would prefer happen in either administration is to actually turn up the dial even harder at a time when the Chinese economy is not in its strongest position, and force them to the table on IP law and reciprocal laws and access to public markets. And the reason I feel this way is not academic research. I'm an investor. I have positions in China. And just so everybody knows why I'm so biased, they have screwed me over the last 12 years. I have no access to their courts.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to focus every single day, twice a day, 3 times a day, on my live streams, on 2 issues: the economy and the Supreme Court, or the stock market, economy, and the Supreme Court. As I started off the live stream, we've had already 4 or 5 major Supreme Court victories. The 5th or the 6th will be, the 5th will be the Supreme Court overturning the absurd, unconstitutional, guilty verdict. Sentencing is in the middle of this month. There's a 5% chance he actually steps foot in Rikers. They want to sentence him to jail. They have to do something like that, because that's exactly what they want to dissuade a certain segment of independent voters. The problem, however, is that the Supreme Court gets involved immediately and backs Trump and overturns the conviction. I've spoken about that endlessly. Anyway, hit subscribe. Be here tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, people. I love you. Paul Bartlett, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. I'll see you tonight, everybody. Thank you so very much. 10 p.m.